Ma'am, this area is strictly reserved for immediate family and officially designated distinguished guests. The speaker was a young specialist, Miller, likely no older than 20. His service uniform was perfectly tailored and his bearing was rigid, yet his eyes betrayed the tired exasperation common to those assigned lengthy ceremonial duties. With a starched white glove, he vaguely directed her attention towards a far-off hill where the general public was gathered. Samantha Morgan remained immobile, her gaze fixed on the solemn ceremony taking place nearly 100 yards away. Her blonde hair was secured in an understated bun. She felt the familiar pressure of a profound memory and an obligation settling in her chest. "I am aware," she replied, her voice low but clear enough to cut through the funereal quiet. "I am here specifically to honor him." The specialist's jaw tightened, revealing a flash of impatience. He was adhering strictly to his protocol. He possessed an authorized manifest of attendees, and this woman's name was absent. He registered her only as an ordinary civilian, misplaced among the high-ranking generals and heavily decorated veterans in their immaculate dress uniforms. "The public area for viewing is located over there," he repeated, his tone leaving no room for discussion. As he prepared to dismiss her entirely, Samantha raised her hand. Resting in her palm was a substantial bronzed challenge coin, its edges smoothed from use. Miller glanced at it without recognition. It was clearly a bespoke piece, featuring a helicopter overlaid with a stylized Valkyrie wing, an unfamiliar crest without any discernible name or rank. He quickly dismissed the item with a brief shake of his head. "Ma'am, I am unable to assist you. Kindly relocate to the designated area." His rejection was definitive. He had made his assessment, and as far as he was concerned, the situation was concluded. However, Samantha Morgan had not piloted a heavily damaged Black Hawk helicopter through a lethal barrage of enemy fire by simply accepting the initial denial. She held her ground, her composed demeanor providing a silent, immovable challenge to his rigid authority. The quiet persistence of the woman began to truly annoy the young specialist Miller. The absence of shouting or confrontation, paradoxically, made the situation worse. Her placid resistance fundamentally disrupted the solemn and orderly flow of the ceremony. He squared his shoulders aggressively, subtly puffing out his chest in a posture of authority that seemed more rehearsed than genuine. "Ma'am, I am making my final request. This is a restricted zone." "I am fully aware of the restriction, specialist," Samantha countered, her voice retaining its frustratingly even quality. She smoothly returned the challenge coin to her pocket, retrieved a plain leather wallet, and extended her VA identification card. "Samantha Morgan." Miller accepted the card, their fingers barely touching. He examined the photograph and the name, Morgan. The name was meaningless to him. It was not listed among high-ranking officials, foreign dignitaries, or the deceased general's family members. With a sigh bordering on outright disrespect, he returned the card. "This alters nothing. You are not on the approved manifest. Could you contact the family liaison office? They are expecting my presence," she asked. "The family is currently consumed by grief," he snapped back, his professional restraint starting to visibly crack. "They are not available for visitors. My orders are explicit." Sensing the mounting deadlock, a staff sergeant, a career NCO whose chest was adorned with numerous ribbons and whose demeanor was overtly rigid, approached. "What is the nature of this problem, Miller?" "This woman refuses to comply, Sergeant Davis," Miller replied, visibly relieved by the backup. "She is demanding entry to the main ceremony but is not on the list." Sergeant Davis directed his expertly intimidating gaze onto Samantha, a look he employed to subdue unruly junior enlisted personnel and assert control over civilians. He was a man defined by adherence to regulations, viewing the world strictly in terms of authorized versus unauthorized. He visually assessed her simple blue top, unadorned slacks, and civilian handbag. She did not conform. "Your identification," he commanded, his voice a deep, rough gravel. Samantha presented her VA card again. Davis took it and studied it meticulously, holding it up to the light, as if anticipating the embossed lettering to flake away. "Morgan," he murmured, testing the sound of the name. "I don't recognize it. Did you serve directly with the general?" "I did," Samantha confirmed. Davis's eyes narrowed further. "Specifically, in what job role?" His query was delivered as an outright challenge, calculated to expose a fabrication. "I flew aircraft." A faint, almost invisible smile of superiority curled on his lips. "An aviator, you say? Very well. Ma'am, many people feel a connection to the general. He was indeed an important figure. However, this day is dedicated exclusively to those closest to him, his family and his core leadership team. We simply cannot permit every casual acquaintance who met him once to enter this restricted area." His condescension was palpable, creating a tension that physically weighed on the immediate vicinity. A few high-ranking funeral attendees, colonels and sergeant majors in their formal attire, slowed their pace, their attention drawn to the silent, growing disturbance. The altercation was becoming a focal point of disharmony amidst the somber grief. "Sergeant, I am not merely an acquaintance," Samantha insisted, her sustained composure acting as a barrier against his scrutiny. "It is imperative that I be present." "Every single person feels that way today," Davis countered, his voice rising with impatience. He was clearly relishing his temporary role as the authoritative gatekeeper, the final barrier. Tapping his communication device, he delivered his ultimatum. "I am offering you two paths. The simple one, where you walk to the designated public area, or the difficult one, where I summon the military police, MPs, to forcibly escort you off this installation. The decision is yours." The threat was unambiguous. He was wielding the full institutional authority of the army to compel one woman to move a trivial distance. He viewed her as an inconvenience, perhaps an overzealous admirer, or worst, someone seeking to bask in the reflected fame of the deceased general. He completely missed the reality of the situation. He then pointed to the faded leather satchel resting on her shoulder. "Furthermore, military insignia cannot be worn on unauthorized civilian clothing." Though he was grasping for a regulation he only vaguely recalled, the formality of his statement was aimed squarely at justifying his actions to the accumulating onlookers. His attention caught a small, circular patch sewn onto the flap of her shoulder bag. Its colors were severely bleached, faded by the intensity of a sun far more brutal than any in Virginia. The insignia showed a helicopter nested within a stylized cross, the recognized symbol for aeromedical evacuation, a dust-off unit. For Sergeant Davis, this was just one more unauthorized embellishment, a cheap accessory supporting the woman's fabricated narrative. "What precisely is that supposed to represent?" he asked, his voice saturated with obvious contempt. "Is that a kind of souvenir or a fan club emblem?" The moment he finished speaking, the surrounding reality seemed to fracture for Samantha. The soft gray tones of Arlington dissolved, replaced by the scorching, sun-baked panorama of Kandahar province. The current scent of cut grass and damp earth was eradicated by the visceral memory smell of scorching hydraulic fluid, the bitter sharpness of cordite, and the metallic odor of spilled blood. The insignia on her bag instantly became more than mere thread. It was a conduit. She was back inside her Black Hawk's fuselage, the steady thrum of the rotors a reassuring rhythm in her body. She registered the violent tremor As the aircraft hit the ground in a vortex of brown dust, the ramp dropping abruptly before the landing gear had fully stabilized. She heard the frantic, desperate cries of the team loading a stretcher. The casualty inside was utterly still, his arm displaying the patch of the 2nd Infantry Division, General Wallace's unit. Cutting through the intense static and engine noise was the steady, calm voice of her pilot, her trusted commander. "We are not abandoning anyone, Morgan. Get him secured." The sensory flash lasted less than a second, yet it held more reality than the posturing sergeant currently confronting her. That patch was not a decoration. It was irrefutable proof. It represented a portion of her history, a piece of her very being left in the harsh environment of a forgotten conflict, a conflict utterly beyond the comprehension of Sergeant Davis, with his pristine ribbons and parade ground bearing. She blinked, and the familiar green lawns of Arlington snapped back into clear focus. The green expanse of Arlington snapped back into clear focus for Samantha. Her outward demeanor remained unchanged, yet internally her resolve had solidified into an inflexible steel. Standing a short distance away, somewhat concealed by a majestic, aged oak, was a man whose profound sorrow was etched into every line on his face. Command Sergeant Major Reynolds, retired, was a figure of absolute, unwavering military rigidity, even in his dark civilian attire. He possessed 3 decades of service, 2 of which were spent directly alongside General Wallace. Their careers had advanced in tandem, from the grueling mud of live-fire platoon exercises to the meticulously organized strategy rooms of the Pentagon. Wallace had been the commanding intellect. Reynolds had been his most trusted confidant, his executioner, and his oldest friend. Reynolds quickly noticed the disturbance at the perimeter. Initially, he felt simple irritation. A funeral of Wallace's stature demanded unblemished respect. But as he continued to observe, the irritation morphed into deep curiosity. The civilian woman possessed an unusual, almost unsettling calm. He recognized that specific stillness. He'd seen it in soldiers moments before breaching a hostile door, and in experienced commanders as their plans collapsed. The composure of someone who had survived true crisis and was entirely sure of her capabilities. Unable to discern their verbal exchange, he analyzed their body language. The 2 guards overtly aggressive and posturing, and the woman resolute and centered. He moved marginally closer, scanning her for any identifying details. She was unremarkable in her plain clothes, but then he spotted it. The bag, and on the bag, the patch. The faded, dust-off insignia struck him with the force of a physical impact. His mind was instantly transported back a decade to a frantic command post, thick with the smell of stale coffee and choked by radio static. He vividly recalled General Wallace, then a brigadier, pacing like a trapped predator, listening to the desperate, pinned-down reconnaissance team. They were facing annihilation. Then, a new voice, a female aviator, serene and utterly steady, cut through the noise. Her designation was Valkyrie. She was a nearby medevac pilot who, having heard the desperate pleas, violated a direct order to steer clear of the deadly landing zone. She simply announced her intent to proceed. Reynolds remembered Wallace trying to countermand the order, labeling the attempt a suicide mission. He remembered her simple, bone-chilling affirmation. "Sir, you have wounded, and I have room." Reynolds looked back at the woman being hectored by Sergeant Davis. He recognized her hair color. He overheard Davis utter her name with obvious sarcasm. Morgan. The name instantly coalesced with the legendary call sign, Valkyrie. Samantha Morgan. A wave of icy dread washed over the seasoned command sergeant major. It ignited a protective rage so fierce it made his hands shake. These guards were not just disrespecting a veteran, they were desecrating the funeral of the man they were sworn to honor, turning away a genuine hero who was an integral part of Wallace's own legacy. Without a moment's hesitation, he pivoted away from the disturbance, retrieving his mobile phone while moving rapidly from the restricted perimeter. His thumb immediately located a contact he hadn't dialed in years, but had intentionally retained. Major General Carmichael, currently holding a director-level position within the Joint Staff at the Pentagon. Carmichael had served as General Wallace's executive officer during the pivotal Afghanistan deployment, ensuring he would grasp the urgency. The call was picked up on the second ring. "General Carmichael, sir, this is CSM Reynolds, retired," he stated, his voice tight and clipped with immediacy. "I'm located at Arlington for General Wallace's funeral service." "Sergeant Major, it's good to hear from you, although I wish the circumstances were happier," Carmichael replied. "I have no time for formalities, sir," Reynolds interjected sharply. "There is a severe security issue unfolding right now at the main access point to the ceremony. They are attempting to eject a woman. Her name is Morgan, Samantha Morgan." A moment of silence ensued as the general processed the name. "She has a dust-off patch on her satchel, General," Reynolds continued, ensuring the context was clear. "The one from Kandahar. Her designation was Valkyrie." The ensuing silence was profound, filled with instant recognition and mounting alarm. When Carmichael finally spoke, his voice was strained with barely contained fury. "Remain exactly where you are, Sergeant Major. Ensure she does not depart. I am en route immediately." The connection dropped. Reynolds swiftly placed his phone back into his pocket, turning his attention back to the scene. The two initial guards were now joined by a first sergeant, and the harassment was visibly intensifying. Reynolds chose not to directly intervene, as that authority was no longer his, but he stood firm, a silent, highly respected witness. Help was mobilized and moving. The ongoing humiliation was now amplified by the arrival of the guard's supervisor, a first sergeant. His flawless, perfectly ironed uniform and palpable air of seasoned, exhausted authority signaled that discussion was definitively over. He had not inquired about Samantha's justification. His sole instruction had been to terminate the disruption. "Ma'am," he began, his voice completely devoid of any empathy, "you have been repeatedly commanded to move to the public viewing area and have deliberately refused. You are now actively causing a disturbance at a state funeral." He then aggressively closed the distance, deliberately encroaching on her personal space. "I issue this as your absolute final instruction. Depart this immediate area now. Should you fail to comply, I will summon the military police to forcibly remove you from this installation. You will be officially cited for trespassing. And considering this," he continued, pointing a finger dismissively at the patch on her bag, "you may also face severe charges for the fraudulent wear of military insignia. Do you grasp the seriousness of this?" It was a step too far, an ultimate, unforgivable act of defamation. To be labeled a fraud and a thief of valor, delivered at the funeral of the very man whose life she had saved. A momentary flash of raw, perilous heat ignited in Samantha's eyes. Yet, when she finally spoke, her voice was low and as chillingly quiet as the cemetery monuments surrounding them. "I comprehend your words, First Sergeant," she stated, "but you do not comprehend the individual you are addressing." Before the first sergeant could launch another tirade, the distinct, quiet rumble of incoming motorcade vehicles sliced through the air. 3 black, government-issued sedans, their lights extinguished but their intent unmistakable, glided to a silent halt just beyond the guard line. The guards, their annoyance forgotten, turned in collective confusion. The door of the lead sedan opened, and Major General Carmichael emerged, his movements sharp with obvious anger, followed by his staff. However, it was the individual stepping out of the second vehicle who caused the 3 guards' blood to run cold. General Peterson, a 4-star general and the current chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. He was scheduled to deliver the eulogy, yet he was here, at the perimeter, his face rigid with fury. The first sergeant, Davis, and Miller instantly snapped to a rigid, shocked attention. The procession of senior officers moved with singular, unwavering focus. General Peterson walked directly past the petrified guards, treating them as if they were inert decorations. He did not slow or glance their way until he stopped precisely in front of Samantha Morgan. The air was intensely charged. Nearby mourners ceased their movements, every eye riveted on the scene. General Peterson met Samantha's gaze, his stern military expression softening into one of profound respect and deep regret. He offered no verbal introduction. Instead, he snapped his right hand up into a salute so perfectly executed, so resonant with deference and honor, it instantly silenced the entire assembly. This gesture of homage came from one of the most powerful military officers in the world, directed solely at the unassuming woman in the blue top. General Peterson fixed his gaze upon Samantha, his severe expression instantly dissolving into one of profound respect and sorrow. He dispensed with speech and instead brought his right hand up into a salute so flawless and perfect it belonged in a ceremonial guide. It was a deliberate, powerful gesture of honor from one of the world's most powerful military leaders, directed solely at the plainly dressed woman. Automatically, Major General Carmichael, the colonel, and every other uniformed person within sight replicated the gesture. A silent, potent wave of salute rippled across the assembly, silencing the scene and leaving the 3 guards completely isolated in their gross error. After a considerable pause, General Peterson lowered his salute. "Chief Morgan," he intoned, his voice deep and resonant with genuine emotion. "It is a great privilege to see you. General Wallace frequently spoke of you. He once confessed that were it not for Valkyrie, he would have returned from Kandahar 10 years sooner, draped in a flag." He then turned, addressing not just the security personnel, but the entire gathering, his voice commanding the absolute attention of the crowd. "For those unfamiliar with this soldier, allow me to introduce a genuine living legend. This is Chief Warrant Officer 4 Samantha Morgan, retired. On the night of October 12, 2011, in the Argandab Valley, a place few wish to remember, then CW2 Morgan piloted her medevac helicopter, call sign Dustoff 71, directly into the very jaws of combat." The general paused, allowing the gravity of his words to settle. The silence was absolute. A company of Rangers, serving under the command of then Brigadier General Wallace, was encircled, sustaining severe casualties, and facing total annihilation. Air support had been withdrawn due to the prohibitive risk. It was essentially a death warrant. But Chief Morgan, monitoring their distress on the guard channel, knowingly violated a direct order to stay clear. With her aircraft under continuous machine gun and RPG attack, her co-pilot critically injured, and her tail rotor shredded, she landed not once, not twice, but 3 separate times within that kill zone. 3 times, she flew into the inferno. She personally dragged wounded men aboard her helicopter while her crew chief provided suppressive fire. She saved 17 lives that night. 17 fathers, husbands, and sons brought home because this woman refused to abandon them. He let his gaze sweep over the attendees. General Wallace is interred here today because he survived to complete a 3-decade career. He lived to know his grandchildren. He survived because of the unwavering actions of this woman. The true hero of that day is not the decorated man we mourn, great as he was. The hero of that day is standing before us now. General Peterson then swung his icy, devastating gaze onto the three security personnel. The first sergeant seemed to physically deflate inside his pressed uniform. "First Sergeant," the general's voice was low and menacing. "You and your men will be in my office at the Pentagon at 1600 hours. You will explain to me in excruciating detail how your men managed to fail on every conceivable level. You failed to verify. You failed to de-escalate. You failed to use common sense. But your most profound failure was one of imagination. You failed to see the soldier standing in front of you. You saw a woman in a blue shirt, and you made an assumption. That assumption, First Sergeant, that casual, unthinking bias, is a cancer. You are a disgrace to the uniform you wear, and to the memory of the man you are supposed to be honoring." The First Sergeant opened his mouth, a stammered apology forming on his lips, but the general cut him off with a sharp chop of his hand. He turned back to Samantha, his expression softening once more. "Chief, what would you have them learn from this? What should I tell them?" All eyes were on Samantha. She stood with a quiet dignity that seemed to radiate from her. She looked not at the general, but at the pale, terrified face of young Specialist Miller. "General," she said, her voice clear and carrying, "the standards are the standards for a reason. They keep us alive. They ensure the mission gets done. They don't have a gender. They don't care what you look like. The problem is never the standard itself. The problem is when we decide in our own minds who we're going to apply it to. Don't soften the standards, just apply them fairly to everyone. That's all." As she spoke the word standards, her mind flashed back one last time, not to the dust and chaos, but to the quiet intensity of her cockpit in the moments before that final landing. The master caution panel was lit up like a Christmas tree. Screaming alarms filled the headset, and the aircraft was shaking itself apart. Through the spiderweb of cracks in the armored windscreen, she could see the flickering muzzle flashes from the tree line. It was an impossible situation. She heard General Wallace's voice, raw with desperation, crackling over the radio. "Valkyrie, you cannot land here. We are taking effective fire. I am ordering you to abort." And she heard her own voice, a stranger's voice, impossibly calm, cutting through her own fear. "Roger that, sir. But you have wounded, and I have room. I'm coming in hot." That was the standard. Not the one written in a regulation book, but the one written on her heart. You don't leave anyone behind, ever, and you apply it to everyone, no matter the cost. In the weeks that followed General Wallace's funeral, a quiet but significant shift occurred within the military district of Washington. A comprehensive update to the standard operating procedures for all ceremonial guards was issued, with a new emphasis on de-escalation and professional verification. A mandatory training module on unconscious bias featuring a heavily redacted after-action report of the incident at Arlington was rolled out across the command. First Sergeant Davis was quietly reassigned to a training billet in the middle of nowhere, a place where his career could fade into obscurity. One Saturday afternoon, Samantha was in the commissary on Fort Myer, debating between two brands of coffee. She was just another shopper, a woman in a pair of jeans and a simple t-shirt, completely anonymous. "Ma'am," she turned. It was Specialist Miller, the young guard from the funeral. He was in civilian clothes and looked even younger without his crisp uniform. He stood awkwardly twisting the handle of his shopping basket, his eyes fixed on the linoleum floor. "Ma'am, Chief," he stammered, finally looking up. His face was flushed with shame. I just wanted to find you to apologize properly. There's no excuse for how I acted, for what I said. It was wrong, and I'm sorry." Samantha studied him for a long moment. She saw no malice in his eyes, only a profound and genuine regret. "You're young, Specialist," she said, her voice gentle. "You've got a long career ahead of you if you want it. You learned something that day. A lot of people go their whole lives without learning it. Don't waste the lesson." He looked at her, pleading, wanting absolution. She gave him his final marching orders. "See the soldier, Miller," she said. "Not the package they come in. See the soldier first, every time. That's all." She gave him a slight, almost imperceptible nod, a gesture of closure. Then she turned back to the coffee, leaving him standing in the aisle with his lesson and a future he now had to earn. The courage of veterans like Samantha Morgan defines the very best of our nation. To honor their service and hear more stories of incredible women in uniform, like and subscribe to She Chose Fortitude.